Everyone, welcome. Just going to give a moment for people to get into this main room from the waiting room. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. All right, looks like everybody's in, so welcome. It's good to see everyone. Welcome to our second resolution hearing. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Andrew, and I serve the diocese as Canon to the Ordinary and Chief Operating Officer. Tonight, we are going to discuss the three resolutions submitted by the Diocesan Committee on Reparations. Please keep yourself muted at all times unless called upon to speak. And if you are invited to speak, please start by sharing your name and parish, and then be very brief. Please get right to the point of your question and comment. We want to have as much back and forth with the resolution sponsors as possible. The text of the resolution being discussed will remain on the screen so that all of us can see it and refer to it. But this does mean that I won't be able to see you. So when we open the floor for questions and comments, please type into the chat and I will call on you in order. We'll spend probably around 20 to 30 minutes on each resolution, depending on how much engagement we're having. So it is possible we may go more than an hour. If that happens, I may call for a very short break after the second resolution so that we can stretch our legs, get something to drink, go to the bathroom, whatever it might be. Are there any questions before I start us with a prayer and then we get going? Any questions? If there are questions, just type them now right into the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so on to the first resolution, acknowledgement and equity, which will be introduced by Erica Gilmore. Erica.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening. My name is Erica Gilmore. I attend St. George's Parish, DC. I'm here to introduce the first resolution, which is a resolution of acknowledgement and equity. Just to get the start on the understanding of the background, at the 2023 convention, EDAL committed to the dream of a beloved community in order to take steps towards restitution for harms done through inherent racism. From this, the Committee on Diocesan Reparations was formed and tasked to educate and recommend policy. This resolution was created to formally and full-heartedly acknowledge that we, as a Diocese of Washington, enacted harms against children of Christ for being Black, and we allowed those harms to continue into our current life cycle. While some steps have been taken in more recent years, much remains to be done. We seek to have our diocese be honest about our parish histories and document accordingly, to educate ourselves on those truths and share them with each other in open and honest engagement, and to encourage each other to grow more in our Christianity by making amends where needed. This first resolution offers initial actions that we can take to help solidify steps of atonement and work towards a true culture of equity. Not one of inclusion, as is often cited, for that term still signals of a primary entity allowing others to enter the fold. We ask this diocese to create, encourage, and live a culture of equity where no one group is at the lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, let's open the floor for questions or comments. Please type into the chat and I will call on you in order. And please don't be shy. Okay, so I'm not seeing questions or comments. Alan, I'm going to ask you to pull the resolution down for a moment just so I can see everyone. I don't want to cut short any. Oh, there we go. Robin, would you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, good evening. I'm Robin Pizer from St. Luke's Brighton. And I was just wondering the region of it, that's who all is being covered. It wasn't clear to me. Is this just the Black congregation, the Episcopal Black congregations, and regionally in DC and in parts of Maryland? So I was just interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank
Currently, thank you, Robin. Currently, this focus is just on the Black, first of all, the Diocese of Washington. We aren't speaking for the entire Episcopal Church. And then secondly, it is focused on these resolutions for the Black congregations and the Black communities within our diocese. We acknowledge that there are other ethnicities and groups that also have had histories that need to be represented, but it's so vast to encompass that all into these resolutions this year. It would be a bit much, and you couldn't truly address the histories and the harms in the best way. So we chose to focus on the Black community as a starting point.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Abbott, would you, yeah, please introduce yourself and share your question.
Thank you. I am Abbott McCartney from St. John's Church, Lafayette Square. Look at the resolution favorably, which I think it's a good starting step for discussion. But you said recently there have been actions taken, and I believe going back to John Walker for the last 50 years, this diocese has been doing a lot of good work to address the issues of the harm from slavery and racism. So it seems to me, is there a way to tweak the resolution, at least the explanation, to recognize the fact that this has been an ongoing discussion for over 50 years and that you want to continue that conversation?
We can look at that. We do acknowledge, again, that work has been done. We did not want to come across as if the diocese has forever ignored the Black community and not made any attempts. I think the group will need to look at that and see how we can incorporate that in a way that makes sense. And again, there are the 3 resolutions. So we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Mitchell, you have a question. Cynthia, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sorry about that.
There you are.
From Christ Church in Kensington, Maryland. And I wanted to know where one could go to learn more about the history of the harms and where are they documented?
Thank you. Good question.
Thank you, Cynthia. So there is a website on the Episcopal, the EDAW website. We do have a page on reparations. Okay. And on that website, there are some of the stories that we have captured so far, some resources which you can look into. And I think we've posted a video by now, I know we've been working on a video to be posted as well. that
Yes, I
speaks
think I
to-
saw the video, yes.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so edal/reparations.org.
And Peter Jared Shell has just posted a link in the chat. Thank you, Peter. Other questions or comments, friends? Resolution number 1. Alan, I'm going to ask you to drop the resolution from stop sharing for a moment. I just want to look at a number of screens here. I don't want to rush through this first resolution. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask a question or make a comment if they have one. But I also don't want to prolong this this part if we don't need to.
Well, I thank you all for your consideration of this resolution. And again, as we look to work towards a culture of equity, we appreciate the support that we have been receiving so far. And if there are any questions or concerns, we are open to listening to them and trying to resolve them together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Okay, Alan, I'm going to ask now if you would share the screen, resolution number 2 on the screen. And this resolution will be introduced by Glenna Huber. Now, Glenna has been in transit. Glenna, are you able to introduce resolution 2?
In 20 seconds.
In 20 seconds. So resolution 2, friends, is for the creation of a reparations committee in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. And so we'll just wait for Glenna to introduce it.
Head southeast.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Glenna Huber. I am the rector of the Church of the Epiphany in downtown DC, also co-chair of the Reparations Committee. This resolution was created in conjunction with the Committee on Black Ministries, taking into consideration some of the concerns that the committee raised. This committee is sunsetting at the conclusion of the convention on January 25th. We understand that the work of uncovering past harms in the Diocese of Washington will need to continue. So we understand that these harms in some ways continue to impact us today, and the work we have done in many ways is just the beginning. The committee is also aware that there are congregations that would appreciate help in working on their history through a lens attuned to the role that race has played. A committed group of individuals appointed by the bishop would have the ability to respond to and highlight their efforts. This group would also be able to design the criteria for the disbursements of funds. The committee would work with diocesan leadership to help ensure that there is always an alignment of vision. Our hope is that this committee will help equip the diocese, the people of the diocese, as we move toward a culture of diocesan equity.
Thank you, Glenna. Okay, friends, so we're going to open the floor for questions and comments. We'd love to hear from you. Again, the more conversation we have tonight, the more prepared we will be for discussion and vote at convention in about 10 days. So questions or comments, please type into the chat. Yes, Roy from St. George's in Glendale. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say was great that the actual PDFs of the resolutions were included with the email because it makes it so much easier to read all of the details. And thank you for that. That's my comment. My question would be is that were these resolutions written completely and uniquely by members of EDAO and the teams that worked on these? Was there any guidance given from other dioceses that may have done similar resolutions?
Thanks for the question. Yes, we've been working on this for for 2 years. Over the course of those 2 years, we've been very diligent to not only seek advisement from the other dioceses that have done this work and are doing this work, but we have worked with other entities, Georgetown, VTS, to name just two. And we have been in conversation with stakeholders outside of the Episcopal Church. So not to mention the efforts that preceded this particular committee. So there has been input about reparations, the role of reparations, how the Diocese of Washington could engage reparations, and an appropriate entry point that was tangible.
Thank you for that answer. And I would also just mention that St. George's in Glendale celebrated our 150th anniversary last year. And one of the big things that we worked on was trying to find out if many slaveholders participated in funding or building our chapel, which was built in 1873, and the fact that there will have this ability for other congregations with supportive historians and stuff like that is wonderful, and I think is a highlight of the resolution. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Glenna. Nancy Stockbridge has pointed out that perhaps there's a word missing, and Alan is highlighting the clause right here. It's the committee composition shall consist of at least 5 to 8 members appointed by the diocesan. I don't know,
Yeah.
is it the
Bishop.
Bishop.
Yes, sorry.
So we will, the committee will be able to make edits after this hearing. So I think that would be a good edit to make. Thank you, Nancy, for pointing that out. Pamela, you have, let's see, is it a question or a comment? But please unmute yourself and would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Father. I'm Pam Orrell. I'm from St. Andrews in College Park, and I'm an alternate, so I don't actually have a vote on this, but I just wondered how the Office of the Bishop might be identifying team members to serve on this committee. Is there going to be a call for participants or nominees, or how does that process work?
I believe that the details of the process will be at the purview of the bishop. What she did last time was invite those who were interested and had been working around reparations for some time to submit an application of interest. I imagine something similar will happen again.
Thank you. Catherine Gibson also has a question on regarding the composition of the committee. And it says the composition says there will be at least 5 to 8. And the question is there an upper limit on the size of the committee? Thank you, Catherine, for that.
Thank you. I believe that we determined 8 so that the process wouldn't get stymied. If you've got too many opinions in the room, it slows down movement. And so we really do want to hear as many voices as possible. And so there can be subcommittees, but the decision makers, we found that 8 is a good number. Less than 5 is problematic because you have 4, so 5 to 8.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Glenna. My concern was just that if you say at least 5 to 8, somebody at convention is going to want to edit that to say it is 5 to 8, and I wasn't sure that's what your intention was.
Sure. I mean, I think that you can, if there are, again, we're looking at a process that's going to be over the course of 10 years. If there is some work that we're doing, let's say that in 6 years, we'll be doing some work around Indigenous concerns. We might need more than 8 to adequately address those issues. So I think the wording is there to provide some parameters, but not to inhibit the bishop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I can see a couple of people have made some suggestions for wording in the chat, so thank you all for that. Sally Ethelston, you have a comment or a question, I'm not sure, but please unmute yourself and we'd love to hear from you.
Actually, it was really just to say that it's wonderful to see this moving forward. I did note some kind of either typographical or possible omission of a word in the very last paragraph. Since I have the floor, I will just make another comment that I found it fascinating at San Mateo, St. Matthew's Hyattsville, when I started trying to kind of do a summary of the history of the church to discover information that kind of leads you to think that there is some very interesting history buried in that church and the churches that preceded it. And so I'm really, really happy to see that there will be resources, including expertise, made available that would enable congregations without many resources in this particular area to actually do a better job of understanding their own history. So just thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sally. James Mills, you have a question.
Yes, I'm Jim Mills from St. Luke's, Bethesda. Could you go up to the first paragraph that has the letters? Yeah, that's it. B says develop a comprehensive reparations plan, and C says review the implementation. And I was wondering if something needs to be added there, suggesting who approves the plan and who conducts the actual work before you get to the stage of reviewing the measures. Has that been considered by the people proposing this?
Sure. I think there's some inherent checks and balances. This is a committee that is, by resolution, will be approved by convention, therefore is answerable to convention. Is that accurate, Andrew?
Yes, convention and council between conventions.
Great.
And then how you will identify the people who are going to conduct the work? It wasn't clear to me here.
Right. The bishop has the authority to appoint those who will be doing the work for this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Andrea Fraser-Reed, you have a question. Think about metrics.
Hi, Andrea Fraser-Reed from St. Albans in DC. I think my concern is how do we know that what we're doing is working? That's something that since I read the resolutions I've been struggling with, because I've seen in other instances where in other contexts where it doesn't work as we're hoping, or maybe because the process didn't have the metrics set out when it started. What are we trying to accomplish here?
Sure. I think it would be helpful then to go back to the definition of reparations. What we are doing is acknowledging and responding to a harm. So in that sense, there really are no metrics, right? You apologize for the harm that you have inflicted. I have said in other venues that reparations is not meant to be salvific. We're not trying to save any particular individual or any particular church or anything like that. What we are doing, or what we are asking the committee and the diocese to consider doing, is apologizing for the harms, the historical and current harms that have led to the creation of an inequitable diocese. Now, I would define success as when we are equitable, when all congregations have access to be able to utilize the same resources. And so we still have a ways to go around that. I think that the committee, depending on how they decide to disperse funds, can determine, what if it's grant based, then what kind of information they want to hear as it regards grants. But something like, St. Columbus essentially stole money from St. George's and we are just paying that back, right? Or Black clerics have not been able to receive the pension they were due, and so we pay that back. So that doesn't fall neatly into a system of metrics.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Glenna. Daniel Zimmerman, you have a question, I believe. Daniel, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, you mentioned early on in the discussion.
Daniel, I'm going to ask you if you could share not just your name, but your parish, please.
Okay, St. James Potomac.
Thank you.
And I'm an alternate delegate. I may not be at the meeting. But you mentioned early on the issue of recognizing that this extends beyond the Black community, but yet you don't say anything about it. Should we not at least pay lip service to some of the other communities that have been affected by racial or other types of inequities?
I think that, well, from our understanding, the wording is broad enough that at a different point in time, other marginalized communities can be incorporated into these efforts. But to get the conversation off the ground and really out there, we have chosen to focus on the racialized history in the Diocese of Washington. That does not mean that in the future things won't shift, but currently for this diocese, it is about racialized harms.
Thank you. Chandra Lewis.
Good
You
evening.
have a question.
Good evening. I'm Chandra Lewis from St. Paul's Rock Creek in DC. And I was looking at, let's see, you have it all the way up to B. I had a question about D, be it resolved, where you spoke of the historian the historian would have the capacity to accompany congregations as they examine their history through a lens of race. And I was wondering, for churches who have possibly limited, lost, or no files, could you possibly describe a process of what you would do, what the historian would do, and is there a time limit involved as how far you would go or how long it would take to help that particular church?
Sure, that's an excellent question that I'm not equipped to respond to. Should the committee be formed, the historian and the archivist, and I think diocesan leadership would have to work through that concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Pamela, thank you for your comment in the chat. Appreciate that. Michelle Morgan, you have a comment. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Michelle Morgan, St. Mark's, Capitol Hill. I just want to say that I love this as a start. This is the first part of it. And I think the institutional harms that I've seen around being in EDAW really does focus on anti-Black bias. And as an Indigenous person, I would say there's other things to be addressed. But I think that we move forward with this with solid guide and not asking for an exact accounting, but to do the work. And I think that other things will come out of that. So this is a gift to all of us. And I want to thank the committee, and that's my comment.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. And thank you to Melanie Mullen for her response to in the chat to Daniel Zimmerman's question. Let's see. Birgit, I think you're next. You want to share either a question or a comment. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening. Birgit Mead from St. Andrews in College Park. I'm the delegate. And
Birgit? Friends, I think we just lost her. Can all of you still hear me? Can some people? Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we lost Birgit, so hopefully she will exit and come back on. So we're going to move on for now. And I think Caitlin Frazier, you have a question.
Yes, I'm the Reverend Caitlin Frazier from St. Mark's, Capitol Hill. And I wanted to ask about the relationship between resolutions 2 and 3. Does the actionability of the steps in resolution 2 depend on the funding in resolution 3? And what would happen if one passed and the other didn't? Thank you.
Right. If funding passed and the committee didn't, then someone would need to be charged with determining the ways in which the funds are dispersed in a way that recognizes the harms appropriately. If 2 passes, if the committee passes and the money does not, the committee can still do the work of uncovering histories. I think there would need to be some modifications, but that work could continue. The committee's work could continue.
Thank you, Kate. Let's see. Other questions or comments? I think I'm caught up in the chat. But if not, please type, if I've missed you, please type your name into the chat again. Anything else on this one, friends? All right, Alan, maybe you could stop sharing. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions or comments. Glenna, any last thoughts?
No, thank you all for your consideration, and as we journey towards a culture of equity.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for all those questions and comments. That was really wonderful. Let's keep that going. On resolution number 3, funding reparations in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, which will be introduced by Peter Jarrett Shell. Peter.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Peter Jarrett Shell, and I am the rector of Calvary Episcopal Church in near Union Station, Washington, D.C., and a member of the Reparations Committee. So this is the one that actually establishes the funds that would go out that the committee, continuing the next iteration of the Reparations Committee would disperse. The commitment is for $5 million over 10 years for budget cycles 2026 through 2026 through 2035. Those funds would be come from diocesan assets. They would not come from congregational assets. The Finance Committee and other folks have already identified particular sources within diocesan assets that could be used to make these disbursements. Some of the particulars would depend on exactly where they were going towards. We're also making an invitation for congregations of the diocese who feel so moved because of their investigation of their own history to contribute toward these funds. That's strictly a grace invitation as people feel moved by the Spirit. Those would be additional funds added in towards the effort and would not be used to decrease the diocesan commitment towards that $5 million. The focus, as stated at this juncture, would be specifically the harms and undermining and sabotage that have been experienced by Black congregations and Black members of EDOW, of the Diocese of Washington. And the Committee on Reparations, which would be founded by the second resolution, the one that Glenna presented, would determine disbursement of those funds. They would work in consultation with the Finance Committee and the Treasurer to advise where those funds best come from and how they should go forward. And finally, the statement would be that the disbursement of these funds in full or in part shall not be considered a completion of the diocesan reparations process. That last statement is significant because for a couple of reasons. First, we understand that the process of reparations is about more than just the money. As Glenna stated, this is about a process of trying to bring us towards a culture of equity. And so there are structural changes, there are changes in our Christian education, and our worship, and other aspects of our diocesan institutions and culture that need to be addressed. Nonetheless, the funds themselves are an essential part of it. We're always reminded in Scripture that Jesus told us, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so we understand this financial commitment to be a really important part of our seriousness and our earnestness around this effort. And also because we also understand, I know many of you serve on your vestries in your congregations, that finances really do matter in the life of our congregations and what they're able to accomplish. The figure of $5 million was reckoned basically threading our way between 3 considerations. The first was the magnitude of the injury as best we were able to determine it. And we looked at this principally from the avenue of the wealth inequity that exists between the Black and white, predominantly Black and predominantly white congregations in our diocese. And we reckoned it essentially arithmetically when you divide the investment assets and the real estate assets by the average attendance, the number of people in each congregation, you can get a baseline of what the average assets per person in attendance are. We can identify what the disparities in those numbers are between predominantly Black and predominantly white congregations. And we can estimate the aggregate disparity at being around $270 million. So this obviously falls significantly short of that. That's part of the reason we say disbursement of these funds may not be considered the full completion of the work. We may decide that more disbursement is necessary as we investigate. The second 2 considerations are what is possible, because we don't want to put ourselves in the position of making a promise that we simply can't deliver on. And so partly in consultation with Finance Committee, with the Treasurer, getting a sense of what is possible over the next 10 years, this figure was landed on. And the last piece was where we could actually find avenue for those funds to go. And this was figured in consultation with the Committee on Black Ministries in the diocese of identifying kind of what they thought potential places that these funds could go towards, so that we would know that during this 10 years that there would be clear and obvious avenues for these expenditures, which have real concrete impact on the lives of these congregations. Speaking to the earlier point, where we noted that, of course, there are other groups to whom these, that have legitimate claim of reparations from the diocese, and as well that the larger Black community beyond our congregations also might have legitimate claim. We considered that we wanted to begin work internally because there's a clear history that we have of the under-resourcing, the abuse, the theft from Black congregations for which we need to make restitution. Nonetheless, in making these disbursements, the Committee on Reparations may decide that there's some portion that needs to be put aside for kind of impact grants or disbursements to support the economic empowerment of the Black community at large in the geographical territory of the diocese. So that's essentially kind of our thinking around it, how we figured and reckoned it. We do have, the resolution does contain a list of recommendations of what those kinds of disbursements could be for. And this could be for grants to Black congregations of the diocese who identified a particular need, either in their physical plant or in their mission for which they didn't have opportunities to act on the way that some predominantly white congregations historically have. Those funds could go towards that. Towards supplementing the pensions of retired Black clergy who had served in predominantly Black congregations, and because of the lower income and the way that pensions are calculated, are therefore forced to retire on lower fixed income than their white colleagues. For the support and uplift of Black seminarians, for getting grants so that Black clergy could serve in this diocese, and then potentially for the founding of an endowment that could kind of disperse for the economic empowerment of the Black community at large in this geographical region. However, those are all recommendations. So this resolution explicitly does not attempt to tie the hands of the Reparations Committee in terms of how they disperse those funds. And this goes to a little bit of kind of how we began to think about reparations in our work, learning from other dioceses, learning from other partners. And a critical aspect of that work is the restoration of autonomy and authority to communities that have had that autonomy and authority stripped. So what we don't want to be doing is a kind of charitable work that at some extent allows the diocese at large to still be determining the course of where those funds could go. And this is a difficult piece of it, and I know as a white person in particular, I struggle with this. But there is an aspect of reparations that really is genuinely about letting go and surrender. And so certainly we do want to be conscious about making sure that we're working with good partners along the way. But when it comes to that question of the metrics that are up, partly the question will be essentially, did we make these disbursements to members of the Black community that are able to act on the uplift of their community? And that'll kind of be one of the core metrics. So that's what I'd say about it. I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, friends, floor is open. Questions or comments, please type away in the chat so that I can call on you. And we'll leave the resolution on the screen. Richard Weinberg, please. Oh, already called on you, Richard. Sorry.
No problem. I was looking on Richard Weinberg, rector of St. Margaret's. I was looking on the website for perhaps it's still in production of some kind of annual report with numbers. I know we've seen draft operating budgets, but I was just looking for a balance sheet.
Yep, that's a great question. So audited financial statements of the diocese are available in the Diocesan Journal, which is on the website. And I'm wondering if Alan, who is our tech host tonight, could find a link to that.
I think I can manage to find the journal link.
Perfect.
Knowing that it's there is
Yep.
answer enough.
Audit is in the journal.
Thank you.
Beverly Wells.
Beverly Wells. I am a council member from Trinity Episcopal Mission in Upper Marlboro. My question is, how does this resolution solve the racism experienced by Black congregants in predominantly white churches?
Thank you. So I'd say first, going back to Glenna's point, that reparations are not intended to be salvific. So it certainly would not expect that it would solve the racism, but the question of how it might address that racism is extremely important. I would suggest that the reparations committee, and this is partly why we have, again, tried not to bind their hands towards particular kind of program of disbursements. But the reparations committee, in considering that question, in consultation with the Committee on Black Ministries and other partners that they might work with, might decide that yes, there are particular avenues that we think this funding needs to go to address specifically that experience of Black congregants, Black staff, Black clergy, Black employees in predominantly white congregations, and the racism and undermining that they have experienced as well. So the resolution preserves the autonomy of the reparations committee that would be founded to go forward and figure out, okay, how are we going to use those funds to address that point?
Thank you. And thank you to our colleague Emily, who posted a link to the journal in the chat. That link will take you to the Diocesan Journal, and within the journal, you can find the audited financial statements of the diocese, which includes the balance sheet. Thank you, Emily. Other questions, friends, comments? Ann Wakefield. Please unmute yourself. Love to hear it from you.
I'm sorry.
There she is. Hey, Ann.
Hi, Andrew. How are you? I'm Ann Wakefield from St. Columba's. I just had a question, maybe more of a clarification. If a parish owes money or reparations, and that amount has been, understood, or to a Black parish, does this, let's say the parish has all the money, they've got it, the money in cash to do this reparation. Does that reimbursement go to EDOW to make the disbursement, or does I guess I'm not clear, or does the parish pay back the particular Black church for reparations?
So the resolutions, as we stipulated them, try to hold within the authority of what convention can dictate, and that pertains essentially to the diocese at large. So the $5 million commitment is a commitment of the diocese at large. So the question of particular congregations owing reparations is not really within the purview of this, though there is a kind of a sense of a grace invitation to participate. If a particular congregation in their life and as they review their history, as they are moved by the Spirit, determines that, yes, we do believe we owe these reparations to a particular community, they would have full autonomy to go move forward in that action on their own and to say, we are setting up our own avenue of making disbursement to do this. They could also take up the invitation to contribute to this diocesan fund, which would be under the authority of the reparations committee. So this makes the invitation, but does not attempt to bind any particular congregation and how they see going forward in this. And again, we think that's an important piece because certain congregations, like St. Columba's, might be able to identify, we have a particular debt and a particular history that we can identify, and we want to pursue how we move forward on making restitution for that debt with integrity. Another congregation might look at the question and say, we see how we participate in this larger structure of harms. Because of the way history is sometimes fragmentary, we can't put our finger on the specific moment or debt that we can make restitution for, but we are moved by the Spirit to consider that, yes, this is something that we ought to do. And then they would have the option of contributing to the diocesan fund, which the reparations committee would disperse in that way.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you, Peter. Other questions or comments, friends? Let's see. Abbott, I think you're next.
Thank you. This is again Abbott McCartney from St. John's Church, Lafayette Square. 10 years is a long time, and obviously you have a meritorious request, but you're committing future conventions for 10 years to devote this money because you're going outside the usual budget process. So obviously I know the answer to your point, but is there a way to limit, let's say, to 3 years? So therefore future conventions will have to make that, revisit that decision and make a decision as they go every 3 years, because who knows? I mean, we're facing a situation where, I mean, obviously the council and the bishop make annual decisions as to where to prioritize the funds, the limited diocesan funds. So that you're sort of taking away, if you will, it's a meritorious reason, meritorious basis for the money. But obviously there are short changes, then it reduced the amount of money for church growth, or for, let's just say there's a huge deportation program in the United States and the Episcopal Church, EDAW wants to step up and help struggle with that battle. So there's other demands for money over a period of time. So is really 10 years necessary, and rather than going 3 years by 3 years and making a new commitment after 3 years?
Thank you, Abbott.
So I think that's a very good point. I would say that the 10-year commitment is important, and partly because, again, going back to Glenna's point about establishing a culture of equity, that is not short-term work. And we do have the understanding, I think you probably all know from your own parish stewardship campaigns, that we do experience this situation where our money goes, our hearts follow, and vice versa. And so that longer-term commitment speaks to that kind of long-term commitment to change the equity culture of the diocese. To the question of something emerging that you know, this might unduly bind the diocesan hands at a moment where we need to make some other decision. My understanding, and we could get a legal counsel from the diocese, but my understanding is, if such a situation came up, a future convention could pass a resolution. This is not a constitutional change, to say, you know, we made this commitment, but now we have to adjust it. That is certainly possible. You know, I hate to put it in these terms, but as a person of faith, you know, this is owning this debt is like any of the commitments we make. And, you know, like, I wouldn't receive someone into marriage counseling if they said, can we just like make our commitment on a 3-year by 3-year basis? And I'd be like, no, that's not what this is about. But it doesn't, you know, change. Their circumstances might change. We might, you know, need to change it, but the council, the convention has the authority to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Janet Lipscomb, I think, I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question or both, but please unmute yourself.
Yes, it's both. Hi, I'm Jan Lipscomb from St. Mark's Episcopal Church, Capitol Hill. And I just wanted to say thank you to the committee for mentioning the concept that they may at some point extend their work to Indigenous peoples and others who are harmed. I did hear the presentation November 20th and understand the reasoning why we're focusing on the Black community. And just a comment that, after all, DC was referred to as Chocolate City, and the emphasis on harms done to Black individuals is absolutely warranted. But I have a question. Are there plans to include Black families who provided unpaid or very minimally paid work prior to the end of the Civil War and during Jim Crow? Is this inclusive of the generational harms for those families and individuals?
Yeah. So thank you. That's a very good question. As you stated, the focus of this resolution is specifically the harms done to the Black community. But in considering that question, the Reparations Committee has tried to take a holistic framework, and we have broken it up into periods. So we've considered the period of chattel slavery, the colonial period, and the period up to emancipation, the period of Jim Crow, and then the period post-Jim Crow. And in our work, both in the research of the diocesan history, in the current financial outlook of our congregations, in the parish histories that congregations themselves have investigated, we've been able to identify harms of anti-Black racism that have occurred in all of those periods and whose legacy continues on into the current moment. So this is not simply limited to the question of chattel slavery, though that's obviously foundational, but also considers everything that, and as well going on to the present, and harms that are still ongoing. And certainly the ones that you've mentioned about Black families who are doing unpaid or minimally paid work from the Civil War period into Jim Crow would fall under that rubric. So yeah, absolutely, that's very important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Peter, there's a question in the chat. The person can't unmute themselves, but the question is, will the money be in an interest-bearing account, and who would get the interest?
So this is a question that I think the Finance Committee and Treasurer and perhaps Canon Walters would be better able to answer. But my understanding is that the initial council of the sort of financial gurus within the diocese is that these funds would likely come from draws on particular endowments of the diocese. So they are currently interest-bearing accounts. And these would be draws towards this $5 million disbursement.
Oh, that's interesting, Peter, because
That's different. I say that's why I said I might be wrong.
No. I'm thinking the question refers to the $5 million, like it gets allocated. Will it be placed in an interest-bearing account until it's allocated? Does that make sense? I thought that's how I interpreted that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would then, if that's the question, then I would say as written currently, this speaks to budgeted funds. And so the budgeted funds will be for actually disbursements. And so it would be $5 million budgeted each year with the expectation that the reparations committee would request each year what portion of that $5 million they've got to disperse based on requests and identified needs that they've worked out in conjunction with the Committee on Black Ministries and other partners in the area.
Thank you.
Jonathan has said the same thing. It will remain where it is until the committee makes recommendations for disbursement. Yes.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Friends, Jonathan Nicholas, who shared that comment in the chat, is the diocesan treasurer. Thank you, Jonathan. Michelle Morgan.
Yeah, hi, Michelle Morgan, St. Mark's. This is a really long, sordid history of chattel slavery that we're reflecting into. And I just want to say that I asked a couple of my parishioners to go to the conversations about reparations. And I asked a couple of them, how did it go? And to a person, they told me it was one of the most painful conversations they sat through as they listened to these historic wrongs. And I think, and I would ask all of you to reflect on what it would be like to go back every 3 years and open a wound again and again and again. So 10 years is a drop in the bucket in this long arc of history. And if we're going to seriously take reparations seriously, I don't think we should try and put 3-year times on it. I appreciate you, Abbott. I appreciate the question, but I think there's a deeper question here is we're trying to right a wrong, and to ask people of color to carry this burden every 3 years, I think it's just wrong. And I think it's the wrong question. And I appreciate your time for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, friends? Okay, not seeing. Oh, there we go. So Robin's question, Peter, is the wording is not clear to her. Is this meant to be $5 million per year or $5 million in total over 10 years?
Oh, we can add in a little clarification. It is $5 million total over 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. Alan, I'm going to ask if you would stop sharing. Peter, any sort of last reflections?
No, simply to say that I think that Glenna kind of summarized what I would say is the core of it. This is not meant to be self-ethic. It is not meant to be a cure-all. It is meant to be a serious commitment that indicates our earnestness in pursuing a culture of equity, our earnestness in repenting of and apologizing for past harms, and to kind of begin the work where we can. So that's really what I'd say.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for your participation tonight. This has been great. A couple of last words before we close. First, just about the resolutions process from here. The sponsors of all the resolutions have an opportunity, based upon these hearings, to edit their resolutions. And final drafts of the resolutions will be posted this coming Monday, along with amendment forms, because we will be accepting amendments to resolutions in advance of convention. And all delegates will receive an email from us on Monday with links to the final drafts, links to the amendment forms. If you would like to submit an amendment to a resolution in advance of convention, the deadline will be next Thursday, and I have to look at my calendar. I think Thursday is the 23rd at noon. Okay, so amendments in advance, deadline Thursday, the 23rd at noon. Please know that's a hard deadline because then we have a very short time frame until convention. On the day of convention, when we start discussing and voting on resolutions, the amendments submitted in advance will be taken first. And then, of course, we will also be accepting amendments from the floor. So that's the resolution process going forward. Let's see. A big reminder that on Friday night, the 24th, we have a service toward repentance at Washington National Cathedral. Dinner will be served ahead of time. Dinner starts at 5:30 and the service at 7 p.m. The bishop is preaching. I think that this is going to be a really moving service and an important moment in the life of our diocese. And so we strongly encourage everyone to attend. I think you've all received links to registration because we would want a head count for dinner. But we'd love to see you there on the Friday night. Then Saturday of convention, let's see, registration opens at 8. We'll have breakfast available. We'll be doing a practice vote at 8:30, opening prayers at 9, and then the business of convention starts at 9:15. Please remember, this is a big reminder now, please remember to bring a cell phone, laptop, tablet with you to convention because you will need that to vote. And in addition, as I said last week, we are trying to go paperless. And so we will not be printing out convention booklets. So before coming to convention, please download the convention booklet onto your cell phone, laptop, or tablet. So you'll have the convention booklet electronically this year. We'll be saving lots of trees, friends, really. Now, let's see. By the way, these sessions have been recorded. Last week's resolution hearing has already been posted on the Diocesan YouTube channel. Tonight's session will be posted within a couple of days, so certainly by the weekend. Let me see, there are a couple of things. Michael Mangiapane, do you want to unmute yourself? I think you have a question or a comment.
Yes, I had a comment, and this was going on, the prior, question about if it should be a 10-year commitment or shorter. And my comment about it was that we're seeing a time when a lot of corporations, they are abandoning DEI initiatives after only 3 or 4 years of their thoughts on it. And I would prefer for the diocese that we're not in a position where we are reconsidering our commitment to reparations every 3 years. I think it's better that we commit to this 10 years.
Great, thank you. Charles Hendricks is asking if resolution amendments submitted in advance of convention will be available for delegates to convention to read ahead of time. And unfortunately, Charles, the answer to that is no. It's just logistically not possible for us to do that, given the time crunch between Thursday at noon and Saturday morning when we start convention. And Ann Wakefield is asking, is convention going to be recorded? So convention will be live streamed. You'll be able to watch it from home if you are not a delegate. It will be recorded. I don't remember if we post the entire convention on the YouTube channel or just the key bits, such as the bishop's address, the resolution pieces, treasurer's report, budget presentation. But it is recorded. We will have it posted online. Anything else? Other questions just about convention? We're really looking forward to seeing all of you in what is it, 10 days from now. Thank you all for your time this evening. We greatly appreciate it. And prayers and blessings on the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.